Hey guys, it's Megan. Welcome back to the library and back to another video. Today we're going to talk about the 9 books that I read in the month of November. It was actually a really good reading month for me. I read over 3,100 pages, which is crazy. I say read, really I listened to, let's be honest, like 7 of them were audiobooks because that's all I have time for nowadays. But I did also DNF four books, which I really don't even want to talk about the negative parts of this today. I don't know why I'm not in the mood to talk about my DNFs. So I think I'll just mention them briefly at the end of the video. So let's go ahead and get into the 9 books I read this month. So I kind of broke down my statistics because I thought it was interesting that I read 2 fantasy, 1 romance, 1 realistic fiction, 1 horror, 1 like sci-fi light novel, and then I read 3 autobiographies, which like I never read autobiographies, and apparently I was on a kick of reading them. So I read 3. I did read 2 physical books, 7 audiobooks, 3,113 pages, not counting the ones that I DNF'd, which was quite a few pages. The average star rating was 3.64, which I'm guessing is about average, because I had 4 4-star reads, which was super exciting, 1 3.75 star, 2 3.5 star, and 2 2-star reads, which is not good. Usually I would DNF it if it's 2 stars, so we'll have to see why I didn't DNF those. I read 7 adult books, 1 young adult book, and 1 middle grade book. So the first book I read in, I was gonna say September, I don't know what month it is, November, was Green Lies by Matthew McConaughey. I'd been wanting to read this for a long time. I had it on hold from my public library, and it is Matthew McConaughey's autobiography. I would say it's more, not really an autobiography, it's just kind of random little snippets of his life. And honestly, the first half, I would have given like 5 stars. It was great. Like his young, not even childhood, but just younger years. Oh my gosh, the stories that this man has. And the audiobook is told from, from him, he's reading it. So just even hearing his voice was great to tell these stories. But then the second half was much more rushed. I talked to somebody else about it that they said that felt the same way. It was just kind of disjointed. There weren't as many like lessons. I mean, not that it had to have lessons or anything, but the first half did kind of have like life lessons that he learned. But then once he got famous, those stories like just went by really, really fast. So I think I would have either rather him focus on just like the young times and just give us more of that stuff, or give us a lot more from his adult years and him being a celebrity. I feel like there could have been so much more, and it was like he was just in a rush. It almost felt like he was just trying to get finished with the book. And then he spent a lot of time and attention and detail in that first part, and that then by the time he got towards the end, he was like, I'm just gonna get this thing done. So that's why the second half I would have maybe only given like 3 stars. So overall, I gave this book 4 stars and would definitely recommend the audiobook. Then I did something really out of the ordinary, and I read a romance novel. I read In a Holidays by Christina Lauren. And I read this because last year, I think it came out last year, I saw it everywhere on BookTube. Everybody read this at Christmas time, and it was the beginning of November, and I was getting in the Christmas spirit. I was getting out the Christmas decorations. I was like, let's just read it, even though it has a trope that I absolutely usually hate because I'm sick of it, which is repeating the same day over and over, like a Groundhog Day, like you're in some sort of time loop. It's not even the same day. It's more just like she has to repeat something a couple times, but it becomes kind of sci-fi because she's like trying to figure out how this time loop thing works, and she's like trying to explain it to other people and get them to believe it. And so I actually really enjoyed that aspect of it because I didn't expect that that's where it was going. It was very like meticulous, and a lot of attention to detail went into like how the mechanism actually worked, more so than even just the romance. So this was my favorite Christmas story that I've ever read, and I gave it 4 stars, which is shocking, and I highly recommend it. Then I read Keeper of the Lost Cities. I'm not going to talk too much about this one because I talked about it. We're going to be talking about it. You'll see it soon in a whole vlog where I read all the books that my husband bought me last year for Christmas as like a surprise. And this is one I'd kind of asked him to buy, so it wasn't really much of a surprise. But it is a middle grade novel that I thought was going to be similar to Harry Potter and Nevermore, which I read last year at Christmas time and loved. And something about Christmas makes me want to read like young, whimsical, middle grade fantasy novels. And this one is not it. This one is not fun and whimsical. It tries to include science with the fantasy, like there's DNA and stuff that they talk about, and like there's not really screens, but like they mention her iPod and stuff that somebody has to fix with magic. And anyway, it tries to be like magic and science together, but it doesn't really work that well. And the writing is not as good as like Nevermore. It's not very whimsical. It's not really very fun. It does have elements of like Harry Potter, like going off to a magical school in a new world, but there's definitely kind of higher stakes. Like it's kind of sad because her parents have to to forget that she exists. And it's almost like at the beginning, they first think, oh, well, we'll just let your parents think that you're dead when you go off and live in this whole new world and forget your former life entirely. But like, her family was good. It wasn't like Harry Potter where they were like the Dursleys and he wanted to get away from them. These people were nice people. But anyway, it was a little sad. And I was not a huge fan. I gave it like 3.5 stars, although in retrospect, it probably is more like a 3-star. I'm trying the second book in the series. It's like a super long series. There's like 9 books or something now. I think it's like almost finished. I think there's going to be 10. I could be making that up. So I'm going to try to make it through it, the second one, and see if I'm actually even going to continue the series. Then I read Carrie Soto is Back by Taylor Jenkins Reid, which I cannot believe how many of her books I'm reading at this point. But I read Malibu Rising over the summer as like just a fun video of like, hey, will I like popular books, even though that's realistic fiction, and I kind of did. And then I read The 7 Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, which I didn't like quite as much. So I thought I'd give this one a shot because Carrie Soto, if you know anything about her character in Malibu Rising, she just makes a brief appearance in that series because all this author series are like kind of connected just a little bit. Or this one follows Carrie Soto, who is a very, very famous, like best tennis player in the world. And she was made a cameo in Malibu Rising because she like kind of stole somebody's husband and she's really not very nice either. So you're like, how is she going to be the protagonist of a book? But I actually really liked it that she wasn't this like super nice protagonist. And the main love interest, because I didn't realize how much of a love story this kind of was too, but the main love interest is also not a great person. And the two of them together, I actually really liked, and their relationship is very realistic, and it's kind of just about her coming out of retirement because somebody's about to break her record. She'll be like the oldest, she's like 37 or something. She's like the oldest female, you know, to come out of retirement and try to, you know, do like Wimbledon and all these Grand Slam matches. And she actually does pretty well. So that's really what it's about. And I gave it 4 stars and I'd recommend it. Then I read The Hollow Places by T. Kingfisher. So I had read Nettle and Bone by the same author way back towards the beginning of the year, and I loved it. It was so good. And I think I've been wanting something that was very, very similar, but everything she writes is very different. Like, Nettle and Bone was fantasy. This was horror. There was also, what else did I read? Oh, What Moves the Dead, which was a short story based on Fall of the House of Usher. It was kind of a retelling that it didn't really have anything that new or unique in it. And I thought Mexican Gothic was better. But anyway, so this book was a horror novel that sounded like House of Leaves because it's like this museum that there's they find like this room, this like hallway that's like bigger than it should be, and it shouldn't fit inside the building. And that's exactly kind of like what House of Leaves is, where they find, you know, rooms that shouldn't fit inside this house. So that was very similar, but then it goes off the rails because they actually go to this other kind of fantasy world that's super scary. And there's really only like 1 or 2 kind of scary things that happen in that fantasy world. And then she refers to them all the time. She's like, oh yeah, those 2 scary things we saw. And then nothing really else scary happens. Like, I wasn't that scared. It also wasn't intriguing enough. Like, it was at the beginning, but it just didn't go really anywhere with it. So I think I wound up giving it 3 stars, 3.5. I gave it 3.5 stars. It was fine. Then I read The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. The first half of this book, 5 stars. It was so similar to Harry Potter. If you watched my video that I just made a couple weeks ago about books that are similar to Harry Potter, this is the one I picked as the adult book that I've read that is the most similar to Harry Potter, but just the first half. Yes, there's a magical school. It's not quite as whimsical and fun because it is based on like Chinese history. The Opium Wars in this book are called, they're called the Poppy Wars. And this is set at the beginning before like wartime actually starts. So that's why it's a little more fun, I suppose, of her just like training and things, but it goes by pretty fast. Like, there's a lot of training in a short amount of time because by the second half of the book, the war has started. She is off into the real world. It's as if she like were to leave Hogwarts, if it was, you know, Hogwarts, and go off and fight like in a hardcore war with Voldemort. That's what this would be. But in the first book in the series, like, imagine Harry doing that in his first year at Hogwarts. That would be kind of weird. Anyway, so the second half is very, very fast paced. The pacing is kind of bizarre. That switch in tone is kind of bizarre. So I give the second half like 3 stars, gave the first half 5 stars. So overall, I give this book 4 stars, and right now I'm reading the sequel, which is The Dragon Republic. There's a 3rd book as well, The Burning God, and I'll probably be reading that one as long as I at least give this second book 4 stars. Then I read a light novel. Not gonna talk too much about it either because it's gonna be in that vlog. The books my husband bought me last year for Christmas. He really went out on a limb here and got me The Melancholy of Haruhi Suzumiya. I don't know how to say it, but it is translated from Japanese. I think that was part of the problem, is the translation wasn't great. It was just, there was some awkward wording in there, but I do not, it turns out I don't like light novels. I don't really like manga. I don't really like anime. I do love Shaman King and I do love Death Note, but that is really it that I've ever found. I'm just not a fan of the style. It was bizarre. It was sort of sci-fi, but it didn't get sci-fi until like at least the second half or even later. And the first part was just so boring. It took me forever to read this short little 200-page novel. I think it's considered young adult, and apparently in Japan it's like Harry Potter level of epic, and like it got kids into reading, and I'm like, oh gosh, why? Anyway, I gave it 2 stars and actively did not like it. Then I read Yearbook by Seth Rogen, another autobiography. I thought it would be kind of fun like Matthew McConaughey's. Turns out it's more fun. Like Matthew McConaughey tried to have some like deep life lessons in his. Seth Rogen, not so much. His was just fun stories, and honestly, I enjoyed it for that very reason. I gave it 3.75 stars. It wasn't quite 4, but I mean, they were fun. I would recommend it. I would also recommend the audiobook because he narrates it. Finally, I read The Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. So he is, of course, back to being the CEO of the Walt Disney Company. He was the CEO for 15 years. Bob Chapek came in for like 2.5 years. They basically just fired him like 2 weeks ago. And now Bob Iger is back for 2 years to kind of get the company back on track. And so this is his memoir that tells like life lessons that he learned. However, I did not feel like I learned much from him. I actually only gave this book 2 stars because for a book about a founder of a theme park company, or not founder, but like the CEO of a theme park company, you would think that it would be way more interesting, but it was not. And finally, I did DNF 4 books. I'm not really going to talk about them because, like I said, I just don't want to talk about the negative stuff in this video, but I DNF'd Red Queen by Victoria Aveyard. It was boring. I DNF'd His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik, also boring. I DNF'd The 3 Body Problem, which is a sci-fi novel, and I just thought the plot was the focus. I'm definitely a character-driven reader, so DNF'd it. And finally, I DNF'd Addicted to You, the first book in the Addicted/Calloway Sisters series, because, well, and I made it 56% of the way through that book. I tried so hard. I wasn't going to DNF another book, and yet I did, because guess what? It was also super boring, and turns out I just really don't like adult romance. So thank you guys so much for watching. Hopefully that was interesting. Let me know down below if you've read any of these books and what you think about them, and I will see you again soon. Bye.